Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turf's Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone show this evening. All right, a pleasant afternoon, a pleasant morning, a pleasant evening, depending where everybody is around this beautiful world. Hope everybody's having a good day. Rob Starr, along with my unbelievable associate producer, God, he's got so many titles, co-host, friend, peer, Mr. Chris Davey. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. I got titles here at home, but we won't discuss that either, buddy. You'll be amazed at what I've answered to at home here, but I appreciate it. Right back at you.
I think every husband has a name that we don't want to use on the radio. So, anyway, how's things in Southern California?
Well, I've lived in Southern California long enough, most of my life, as a matter of fact, to know that I don't know if we're getting a March miracle today, but it is raining, and we've had a considerable 1 3/4 inches so far since Monday night. So yeah, and it's good. It's come slowly and it's come gently. So all the folks that suffered so terribly at the Eaton fire in Sierra Madre and the Palisades fire, they are not seeing the torrential rains that bring mudslides and things like that.
Oh, that's a good thing. We had a little bit of rain when I woke up this morning here at the west end of Phoenix, and it's a nice day. It's cold, chilly, jacket weather. But I feel sometimes like I'm a native because I see everybody walking around in t-shirts and shorts.
Yeah.
And I'm wearing a jacket and stuff.
Yeah, and here's another thing to look at. Starting next week, we'll be on the same time zone, Rob, you and I. So
I heard the government's 50-50 at that still.
Yeah.
They better hurry up. So
yeah, they better do it.
Well, we had a great time. Let's bring Miss Chris Austin, the proprietor of Maven's Notebook. Yeah, Maven of Notebooks.
Old what's her name?
What's her name? Well, we're trying to cheer you up. You know, we had our little conversation before you were down. I'm just trying to get you up and going. So, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I can't really complain. It's a nice day up here in the North State. We had a little bit of rain last night. We have some snow up there in the mountains a little bit, and so I can't really complain. And it's nice that Southern California is getting some much needed rain, and not really with a lot of the debris flows that can come from heavy precipitation. Right. So so I guess California is not cursed now, is it?
We got
know. Blue skies and no debris flows. It's a good day.
So
it's cold here as well, Chris, and the local Southern California mountains are getting anywhere between 6 and 8 inches at lower elevations to a couple of feet at higher elevations. So it'll be a good boost for the ski industry on the the back end of the ski season.
Yeah, and it's nice to have any kind of precipitation. So we will hope that we'll continue to get some nice mild precipitation as the month progresses. Not a lot of snow up there. I mean, there's a good amount, and they talk about at least 3 fairly wet winters in a row that they're talking about, which is, I think, is a touch. It sounds a touch optimistic. Because if we don't get any more precipitation after this storm event and we get these warm days, then that just melts the snow. So, we're hoping for a good, robust March and into April. I mean, we can get rain and snow in April. And we're not going to be without snow come April 1st, but it's going to be how much? It's not. I don't think it's going to be robust, although, things may change, you never know. But I don't, so I think that we'll have probably some mild cutbacks or mild water allocations, but I don't think that there's going to be severe water restrictions everywhere. I don't think it's going to be like that. The big question is, they upped the water allocations last week for both the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. And the Central Valley Project went for maximum water supply, kind of going along with the orders from the Trump administration. And, the real trick with California water, the real trick with water management is, California's precipitation is highly variable. Excuse me, more variable than any other state in the nation. And which means that we can have really, really wet winters followed by really, really dry winters. And we don't get any rain generally in the summer season, not really until late fall. That's very different from the weather that is experienced in other parts of the country. I mean, there are large parts of the country where there's some rain every month of the year to some extent, but that is not what we get in California. So the main trick that the water managers have to do is how much water do you let go out of the reservoirs, with the understanding that next year there may be very little water to be had, very little precipitation, or the next year could be bountiful precipitation. You don't really know, but you have to hedge for the dry side, because if you empty out your reservoirs and the precipitation is really, really low, then you got a major problem. And we saw that happen, 5-6 years ago when Governor Brown was in office, and they went up on April 1st, and the snow was almost gone by April 1st, and that was a very, very tough year. So we'll see how these 35% water allocations work. If next year is a decent year in precipitation, there may not be much of an impact. But if it's a dry year, it could be very difficult. So we'll see.
Oh, you're exactly right. I'm on the board for the San Bernardino County Water Symposium, and we had a meeting yesterday afternoon talking about we need to have places to store the water. When it gets close, they think it's going to rain, they empty out the reservoirs and send it out to the sea, and we lose all of that. So that's something that's a big deal happening right now. But
hold on, let me interject there. Definitely. And so we have California has sort of pioneered this new technique called forecast-informed reservoir operations.
Right.
And this is where they rely on the weather forecasting, and they've gotten better at forecasting where these atmospheric rivers are going to land, and they've actually been able to negotiate rules with the Army Corps of Engineers, who handles flood control, to allow them to keep more water in the dams when the forecast is dry. And this has worked very well up on the Russian River at Lake Sonoma, and they're also working on implementing this in Orange County. So, but that takes our state-of-the-art atmospheric river forecasting system to make that happen.
So what's the hottest news with water in California? What's our legislature doing?
Oh, well, I'm not exactly sure what our legislature is doing. I looked at a whole class of bills in my donor-sponsor newsletter, and which actually included a piece of legislation that basically said that the legislature intends to pass more legislation regarding the Bay Delta Plan, and that was about all it said. So, but that was explained to me that is what they call a spot bill, and that the details are going to be filled in later. And I would say I certainly hope so, because passing a bill to say that the legislature is going to pass more bills seems to me rather redundant.
It reminds me of we have to pass it to know what's in it.
But I guess the bigger story of the week is that the Supreme Court had made a big ruling on the Clean Water Act in a lawsuit that was brought by the city of San Francisco regarding their wastewater discharges. In San Francisco and in some communities still in California, they have what's called a combined sewer operation or something, CSO. And what it means is basically when there's a big storm, if the sewer gets overwhelmed, then the sewer system dumps the water, which includes raw sewage, into whatever water body. This is, way we used to handle wastewater decades ago, and we certainly have the technology to do better, but it's hard to implement these kind of technologies everywhere, and San Francisco, admittedly, is far behind in doing this. But the regulations, they said, for the Clean Water Act on their wastewater discharge permit were too vague. And they basically said if you dump nasty stuff into the water, then that's a violation. But since all the nasty stuff wasn't specifically defined, San Francisco said, how can you enforce that? And the Supreme Court kind of said, you're right. So they said you can't enforce that. The EPA needs to be more specific in their wastewater permits. So a lot of people are upset and not happy with this decision. And interestingly enough, some groups are actually happy with this decision. The people that are unhappy, I think, are basically they want to see these types of discharges controlled, but now this means that the EPA is going to have to go back and start setting specific numeric limits, and this is something that's going to be years down the road to get into place, if it's even possible to do that in sort of what's going on in this new administration. And the flip side is there's actually an environmental group in Los Angeles that's saying this is actually a good thing because this will mean tighter limits on wastewater discharges. So, glass half full, glass half empty. Hard to say, but that has certainly caused a lot of discussion this week in California water.
Chris, jump on in.
I'm going to. So, Chris, first of all, welcome back this week. We missed you for sure last week, as several of the listeners inquired as to your whereabouts. And so we're glad your trip was fruitful. But last week I was going to ask you a question because there was a notebook feature. I think it was entitled "Fire and Water." It was a article that Robin Meadows did, I think.
Oh yes, Yeah,
you remember that? I was going to ask you about it last week, but didn't get a chance. It was just an intriguing read, a great read, and I just wondered if you had any comments.
Yeah, I think that our partnership that we have had in California in partnering with the tribes and allowing tribal stewardship of lands is really leading to some good results. And,
agreed.
It was great to see that. I have another feature coming up that's going to be posted next week also from Robin Meadows that is on how the Winnemem Wintu tribe is working to introduce winter-run salmon into the McCloud River, which is above Shasta Dam. And this is actually a very interesting story. I'm not exactly sure how they determined this, but they found that there were some salmon in New Zealand that had very much the same genetics as winter run Chinook here in California. And the winter run Chinook are an endangered species, and they're almost gone, at least wild spawning winter run Chinook in the rivers. And so they wanted to bring these back. Now, they're also putting the salmon in the McCloud River, which is above Shasta Dam. So this is quite a process. But they got approval to use these eggs from New Zealand, and they set up a way to incubate the eggs. They started, in our own way, our own agencies. They did it sort of in trays and stuff, and the tribe said no, and they actually came up with this sort of nature-based egg incubator that is very much like trying to mimic the river as much as possible. And they sort of set this up on the side of the river, and they incubated these eggs, and they've released them. They've taken very specific things to handle these fish as little as possible, to keep them as wild as possible. And so we'll see how this works out. But look for that feature next week on Maven's Notebook. A lot of pictures of how they did this. I think the bringing the tribes into land stewardship and helping us with the species is really a very good thing.
I will do it, Chris. Definitely look for that. I mean, the great articles that come out of Maven's Notebooks. Just a note for our listeners, right? Just this one on fire and water. I mean, I learned so much just from reading that, and how the local agencies work with local tribes, that there are these grass fires that are controlled burned on purpose. They improve stream flows, they improve the underbrush and the plants that grow that the tribes depend on. The large stands of cottonwoods aren't affected by these burns at all. And many of the native plants that grow in the area that are beneficial to the tribes and to the surrounding environment are fire dependent, right? They need a fire every once in a while in order to reproduce. So just for our listeners, there's so much to learn from the articles that come out of Maven's Notebook. Not just the Robin Meadows ones, Chris. I know she's a great writer, but yeah, just my plug for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, some amazing things going on.
What else have you heard that's on the horizon for the Delta or Sites Reservoir?
Sites Reservoir is working through the process at the State Water Board. They're having a lot of hearings. They're getting ready to bring the Delta Conveyance Project also to the State Water Board for a change in water rights hearing. So, we'll see how that goes. It's not looking good for the salmon season next year. For 2 years, they banned salmon fishing in California, and it looks like it could very well be a third year of restrictions. The salmon return numbers are not very high, at least for the central California. There was a story from NOAA Fisheries, I think, yesterday that the coho salmon in Mendocino had done really well. So I think the restriction would probably be on the inland rivers, and not necessarily in ocean fishing. But I'm not sure how that's going to go. They're having a meeting, I think, later this month, where they're going to make a forecast for the salmon season and either give numbers or call it closed. So a lot of fishermen are looking to see what happens with that.
Yeah, including me, Chris. I saw the article yesterday on the California Department of Water Resources blog that came out, and still no definitive answer, but just like you say, it looks like a third season in a row is going to be, if not banned, at least restricted salmon fishing.
Yeah, so.
Well, Chris is getting his pole ready to head out that way and be the first on the.
It is never unready, Rob.
I know. Well, we're gonna take a little break here and then bring on one of our featured guests. And Chris, as always, I'm glad you're part of our show. For our listeners, as always, you can go to mavensnotebook.com, where Chris is the proprietor of that. You become a sponsor. You can become a listener and get a subscription for it. No cost unless you want to donate anything to that cause, which we all do. And it's the best way to get your water news about California. And she always has more than anybody knows. And again, I don't know how she does it in a 40-hour week or an 80-hour week or 120-hour week. She's amazing at what she puts out every day. So, Chris, thank you very much, and we will be back with you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back with our special guest that I'm very proud to have on our show. So stick around, and we'll be right back.
Hi guys, I'm Mara Ammons. I'm here at Site One Landscape Supply to talk about maximizing small outdoor spaces. So most folks think having a small yard, you will be limited to what you can do with it. When you design, plan for what they want, but work with what they've got. Do this by strategizing the growth habits of each plant, shrub, and tree that you choose, keeping in mind the similar water needs and sunlight needs so that you can ensure the success once planted. Small but mighty, versatile and low maintenance, dwarf shrubs are a great choice for your small landscapes. Check out Little Missy Boxwood. It only grows 2 by 2 and requires no pruning. Consider these dwarf varieties from our portfolio collection, like Dapper White Butterfly Bush. Look for Burning Love Lakota Weed. This compact shrub offers a variety of texture and color all throughout the season with a beautiful white bloom. It's great as a foundation planting or on the edge in a shaded area. You can offer a living privacy fence in between property lines. Choose evergreens like this Mackie podocarpus. It has a columnar growth habit, creates a natural sound barrier that decreases noise, and it blocks the view from those nosy neighbors. Customers often forget the exterior of their home can be an extended living space. Offer container plantings. Put a few at the front door, pop a collar on the back porch, or accentuate their view with beautiful window boxes. This will boost your recurring seasonal income. Your maintenance team is already out there doing the work. Might as well add a little profit. So plan your work and work your plan. Start with our premium materials from Site One. Use our branch locator to find your closest nursery branch. And don't forget to add all of your planting essentials. We've got your mulch and your soil, fertilizers, and tools. Here at Site One, we want to inspire you with fresh ideas to continue to grow your business. Check out site1.com because we've taken all the guesswork out of inventory and deliveries.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone radio show. I hope Rob Starr is with us, but it appears that he might be on mute. Are you with us, Rob?
I'm here. I don't know what happened. I wasn't on mute, but we got it. Anyway, we're here with a special guest, and I want to introduce him. Here's some background noise. I don't know if it's a plane going over or what, but it's not at my place. And there we go. Whatever that was, we cleaned that up. And thanks our engineer, Eric. Anyway, I'd like to introduce a gentleman who is my state senator here in Arizona in my district, and a gentleman that I had read about and heard a lot from the previous person in that role, Miss Sina Kerr, who's a good friend. And I'm very proud to have him on the show, and I want to introduce him. So it's Senator Tim Dunn. Senator Dunn, how are you doing today? And welcome to the Water Zone.
I'm doing great. Great. I'm doing real good. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. You know, I understand what we're going to ask you a little bit about your background and you know, how you got into politics, what drove you into the political arena. I know you're a farmer and you ranch, and just like the Sina Kerr, and I always believe that the farming industry and ranchers are the backbone of our country, and I really appreciate what they do. I mean, we all need the food, and it's tough work, and I know you have other businesses besides that, but you do have the background to really understand some of the problems with water and such. So can you give some of the people, because our show goes all over the country and actually all over the world, and give a little background on, from your regular business, how did you decide that you want to be in politics?
Well, thanks for the question. So, yeah, when I got out of college, came back to the farm and was working with my father, and one of the things was getting involved in is with the local farm bureau. Worked my way up as being a county volunteer president, was on the state board of directors, and then just enjoyed just advocating for rural issues, rural agriculture, and what's locally important to our city and our county, and then state level issues. And so I was then drafted to run for the state when the state vice presidency opened up. Worked my way through that, so I was the state vice president for 12 years, along with my good friend Kevin Rogers. Was his vice president. He was president, so we traveled back to D.C. a lot, spent about 30 days a year volunteering to travel and up to the state legislature or back to D.C., just advocating for rural issues and water and all things that help support the agriculture industry. So that was 12 years of experience doing that. Enjoyed that, met people all around the country in the Farm Bureau system, and I'd love to go back to D.C. and talk to our elected officials. So, and then retired off of that, and the position came up where my former state representative was removed from office, and then they called me the night before and said, "We want you to be our nominee." And so then in 2018, I was appointed. Senator Kerr was appointed as a senator right before session started in 2018, and I was appointed in February 13th, 2018, to come up here and represent Yuma. Our district is from Yuma up to the West Valley, so very large district, and I lived in Yuma, and I had to replace the person with that. So threw me right into the middle of a appointed office and then subsequently elected offices. So that's how we started that, and then we were term limited out last year. We have 8 years here in Arizona, 4 2-year terms in one chamber, and then you can move to the other, but you have to stay out of session. So Ms. Kerr was term limited out. I was term limited out, so I switched over to the Senate, where I was elected this last year, and Senator Kerr retired. So here I am as state senator.
Well, she's a wonderful person. I met her and her family several times, and they're just awesome people, salt of the earth. So from your point of view, and knowing about running a ranch and farming and all of that, and plus being obviously in the state Senate, what do you see the current status of water in your district in the state?
Well, just because the lay of the land is, I live in Yuma, we farm in Yuma, so we have surface water rights out of the Colorado. Then our district comes up to the West Valley, and it includes all of Buckeye, and so we have two very different in our district, our legislative district. So we start off with the water on the Colorado River. As we know, the 2026 guidelines are negotiating. We kind of took a little pause when after the election. They have to get the new commissioner appointed. So those, working with our 7 states, how we're going to renegotiate the 2026 guidelines. That's top of mind for our people in Yuma and our state in general. So we're working on that. Yuma itself, of our diversion rights, what do we have? We don't use 250,000 acre foot a year because we've been doing 2 crops a year, and most of our ground in Yuma was produce. 90% of the lettuce in the country comes from Yuma, November to April. So it's been very efficient over the last 30 years, fixing and working on the efficiencies. And so we're just, we're actively working on that. Part of the other district in the district and for Arizona in general is the CAP allocation that comes off of the river, and how those, potential reductions. We know that the river's over allocated. We know that we've been in a drought. And so collectively the 7 states are going to have to work together to figure out what those reductions are going to look like and how they impact. So everybody's working on to prepare for that. So that does come into in my Phoenix portion of the district, the Buckeye. There is some CAP allocations that impact that. So that's kind of on the district. And then in the, all things water in Arizona, when people think of water, what's going on, we have like I said, the river and potential cuts on the CAP. Then we have rural groundwater in the state and what do those basins look like, and then the active management areas that are set aside in the Phoenix, the Tucson area primarily, and we have it's a very complicated system, but we have a moratorium on new construction of new certificates that being issued. We're still constructing homes, but that 100-year allocation. So that's we're working through different bills and working with the department on that. We can get into that more detail if you want to explain how that works. But that's kind of those are the top things that we're negotiating and talking about right now.
I know, I live up in the Buckeye area, in the Victory Verado area, and what was interesting to know that it's one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and I understand we're getting a movie studio complex being built out here. Plus the Hughes Corporation bought a bunch of land, and they're looking for 100,000 homes. So it's going to be kind of tough. Saying they have have water for 100 years, but we're going to see as it moves down the road. I want to bring Chris Davey in, my co-host, and I know we got a bunch of questions for you. So Chris, come on in.
Hi, thanks, Rob. Senator Dunn, welcome to the Water Zone. It's great to have you on.
Hey, glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Senator Dunn, let me kind of give you a broad question, if you will. I mean, I know this has a lot of content that we could talk about, and you may have introduced some of the topics to the question I'm going to ask right now. But if you look at, kind of like the top 3 water issues in Arizona, let's take a look at the first one, and that's really the availability of water right now in terms of surface and groundwater, and then maybe we can answer another couple of questions. But how does it look for Arizona right now for water availability?
And when you look at the state as a whole, we have a lot of water. We just got to make sure it's in the right spot. And so, if we isolate, come back into where the majority of the people live in the Phoenix metro area, Buckeye with the growth. There's a lot of agriculture still in the Buckeye area that growing crops. They got some surface water rights, groundwater rights that they're irrigating. For your listeners, in the 80s we did the 80 groundwater code. We have a 100-year supply that you have to. For housing, you have to make sure you prove that availability so that the consumer knows that they can trust that water. And when they redid the model, going through that 2 years ago, the model showed that we were 45,000 acres short 100 years from now, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot. So we're working through that, and they're trying to figure out where some of the well placings, as you do the details, like how much you could be off a little bit over 100 years. And so we're trying to go through, because we have stopped issuing of new certificates on those till we work through the model, and then we can. And it gets kind of complicated, but you can imagine if especially like there in Rob and Verado, they haven't finished the last section of the Verado development, and it started 20 years ago, and so they have a demand called a demand calculator. How much water, how many feet are you going to take per house? How many houses per acre foot? And so that has not changed over time. They used that for the last 20 years, and we know that we're a lot more efficient. We're using a third less water than we did. So you have these debits on the system based on a calculation that was 10, 15 years old, and because you build it into the model. And so we're going through some of that refining, trying to work with the department, work with the governor's office, so we can make sure we don't change just because we need houses. We want to make sure we have good, educated updates to the model, and we're working through that now, so that we can have that going. Because we know the water is there, but when on paper, it's showing that we might be short. So we're working through that, and we also have some bills that we're working on now that in the Buckeye area specifically, and then Canal, it's called an ag to urban legislation, where because the ag has the right to use that water because they have their certificated rights, and if we convert those to houses and force the development into the areas where the ag, which I'm not necessarily saying we want to get rid of the ag, but the development will follow in those places of ag. We're trying to we're negotiating some, and we're getting close to be able to not go around the model, but augment the model in where the water's at, and then it removes, and you're using actually less water because you're not farming it currently. So a lot of things that we can actually continue to backfill that growth that's needed. We got TSMC here that already has $60 billion for building chips, and they said, you heard Trump the other day talk about they're wanting to build another $100 billion and more factories and stuff because you have climate. We've got a good tax base. We got everything, and we do have the water. We just got to make sure we get the housing. We have the hot water for businesses. We're just working through these things to make sure that we have that assured water supply. So that's in the central Phoenix metro area. Those are the big top things that we're working on right now to shore up that availability for houses.
Well, that's a great answer. Definitely. On previous shows, we had Cynthia Campbell on, and just more recently, Troy Hayes from Phoenix Water, giving us a similar setup as to what you just said, especially when it comes to drinking water. Rob and I have been to several of the EPA conventions in the last years. I don't know, Rob, how many? I think I've lost count, Rob, but we've been to many of them. And it seems like, especially the Phoenix area, Salt River Project, all the Arizona project, all of those continue to get awards. So you guys are doing something right, especially from when it comes to drinking water. I don't see there's any issues, and I think, Tim, it's something that you guys should be proud about in the state of Arizona.
I agree. I mean, when you look at all the things we've done, that we're just trying to. When I'm sitting here in my role at the state senate now, trying to build on what our pioneers did when they started building dams before we were statehood, and we were able to do these things, and the technologies and the stuff that we did and the legislation we did with the 80 groundwater code in the 90s when we set aside some basins, three transfer basins that are like across right next to the CAP, so that in an emergency, which we're starting to make regulations now to free up that water to be transferred into the central Arizona to backfill any shortages on the river. So we've had things that people have done. It's my turn to be at the plate now to try to make sure we do good legislation, and we talk through things going pragmatically going forward. And some of the things we did a couple of years ago, Senator Kerr, Ms. Griffin, and myself, Representative Griffin, we made sure we looked ahead for the direct potable reuse legislation, funding for ADEQ to come in. We had the city of Scottsville been a pioneer in that. They were using indirect potable reuse, so they're cleaning up the water to potable standards, dumping it in the water, and then pulling the water back up and putting it back in their system to letting the kind of it's treated and then retreated in the ground. But we got rules in place now where we're going to soon will be that water will be to the drinking water standards. Will be the gray water will be going straight back into the system to as opposed to costing more and going into the ground. I know people don't like to think that, and especially here in Arizona, we have a lot of lakes and ponds and different stuff. And that's reclaimed water, and we do. And golfing is a big part of our industries here. We want to continue to encourage that, but that water becomes more and more expensive when it's being used for those ponds and landscaping. It's going to be valuable to go back into the system.
Well, I had a chance to meet Noel Carter. I don't know if you know him from the Buckeye Water Conservation and Drainage District, and he walked me through, and he was on our show and was talking to us about the farming and stuff on the south part of Buckeye from where I live. And I was amazed. It seems to be an enormous level of salinity that affects the farming areas. And as an owner of a farm, is there any state proposals for implementation of inland desalination installations? And just so you know, we had, and I don't recall the name, maybe Chris does. It was probably about a year ago. We had a gentleman that he was talking to Buckeye and some other cities, and was going to he developed a miniature desalination unit that runs on solar. And they were going to put in 3 at some farming location somewhere in Buckeye, and to see how they work, and if that was an ideal to do. But do you have any issues with salinity for your operations? And I know Israel has tons of that, but they seem to overcome that and maybe worked with some biologists to help use that salinity in the water to grow their crops. But how do you see it, and does that affect your business?
So our farm in Yuma, so we're very similar on the ground. The water depth of the groundwater is about 7-8 feet, and so there's a set of district and bureau wells similar to Buckeye that pump the water into the Colorado River, and then that goes down and gets diverted into Mexico to keep our water tables down. And so we don't have a salt problem, but that's because we need to put flood irrigation at least once in between crops. So if we did continuous drip irrigation, and we do drip on some things, but we're already at pushing 90% efficiency without drip, so it's going to be hard. It's kind of hard to move the needle any higher than that. So if we don't push the salts down, we'll create a salt problem more so than we have. So we have to the way we do our cultural practices in Yuma, and for the produce and the other crops we grow, we do have a combination of different flood and the way we do our sprinklers for when we sprinkle up the lettuce crops and stuff. So a mixture of a lot of different technologies that keep the salts down, so we know that, so we're preventing it from doing that. Up in Buckeye area, that water is saltier. They're growing some salt resistant crops, a lot of alfalfa, right, some other forage crops that are pretty much tolerant. They have to keep pumping the water out so that they can keep it from. Technically, it is a waterlogged area. By statute, it's they are able to. They have to pump the water out and get credit for it going into the Gila River, and so that's it gets complicated when you start covering it up with. If you start covering it up with houses, you're going to have issues because it's still going to be a waterlogged area because they're not waterlogged from what they're putting onto it. They're waterlogged from the convergence of the different rivers as they come down on the subflow. So they're doing a good job of that. And so back to okay, so if we have the salted water, and then the thought process, we should just put a desalting plant down in Buckeye, that salty water, clean it up and use it for all of our development, which is what the cities, as they convert this ag to urban or convert it, they will be doing that. The thing is that water that's down there is already all calculated in the model. It's already somebody's right. It's already we know how much the water's down there. So when the ADWR, the Arizona Department of Water Resources, looks at the availability of water for the 100 years supply, it's already counted. So you can't just say we're going to desalt that water and swap it with water so that we can grow Scottsdale, because it's already accounted in the model on the West Valley and it will be there for the growth as we look at for the future. So we're looking at those small ones to be able to change that water. The cities are using that. It's been a thought. The Arizona, the APS, and the Alberta Nuclear was wanting to bring some of that water out there, but it's already accounted. It's already somebody's water right, even though it's being pumped into the Gila River. That has downstream flows that has been that goes on down to Paloma and Arlington. So everybody, the water's all accounted for.
Oh, interesting. Chris?
But if you want to, and then another, if you want to stay on the desal conversation, one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is we did put money into the Water Infrastructure and Finance Authority. We're targeting $1 billion, but we have 330 million or 350 million in there now to help augment bringing new waters in from the outside of the state. And that people immediately think we're going to go to Rocky Point or go to Mexico. It doesn't have to be through Mexico. It could be through Texas. It could be anywhere that's trying to figure out what kind of a big project that we can have to augment and bring water in. And so they're working through that. They have some requests for proposals, looking at some ideas. Nothing's gelled yet. It would be a big project, but as we start looking for future growth, it is more expensive. But so will be the direct power reuse, and so it as it works for the next, looking out to the future, the desalting somewhere is an option.
Yeah, I know the cost. Sorry, Chris. I know that the cost for desalination is high, but I think the new technology is happening every day, and I think within the next couple of years, I think they'll help solve the problem with the brine issue and how to reproduce that water back into the system. Anyway, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No worries, Rob. We got a great segment coming up, as you know, talking about the Central Arizona project. It'll be up in a couple of weeks here for our listeners. But Senator Dunn, let me ask you a question. On prior shows, there's been a lot of talk recently, anyway, about technology innovation as it relates to our AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, just watch the news, right? Everybody knows that it's the big deal right now. It's growing by leaps and bounds and all that stuff. Do you believe in the incorporation of artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to monitoring and the analysis of water conditions? And is it something that you think is drastically needed, or something you just see on the horizon that's going to slowly become part of the infrastructure?
I think a little bit of both. I think there's some new technologies trying to evaluate groundwater and trying to do some of the models. I think you can really take the AI stuff and figure out the snow melt, and we're trying to kind of looking at the SRPs. We're really lacking snow, but there seems that their water levels are not drastically as low as the snow. So I think there's a lot of artificial intelligence that can help us on analyzing the data as we look forward, and those kind of things is important, so we can try to make good decisions. That's the leaps and bounds. The AI is going to help us to do some of that stuff. That's probably the short term, fastest stuff that we'll be able to really calculate for decision making.
Yeah. Water pricing and allocation, I believe, is critical aspects of water management, and it tries to aim and balance the economic efficiency, social equity, environmental sustainability, and all of those things. Are these considerations implemented within Arizona's legislation decisions?
There's a balance there. We're trying to figure out, some of the things we've had. Some of the bills that I'm running. We're trying to help push more conservation measures. When you look at what we're doing in where the majority of the population is, we are all doing a lot more with less water than we did 50 years ago. So but you still have to do a better job. And so as we make that, when you look back and you start doing environmental concerns, as far as some of those things have higher costs, and when you try to start supplementing, different the technologies cost more. But that we don't want to hurt our environment. So yeah, that's it. I think as the individual citizens and individual cities, we try to just make sure we have the availability of water. We make sure we have good policies and balance that. We did some stuff where we're getting rid of, in that WIFA program where we had $200 million for rural and $200 million for urban to be able to convert from taking out some of the lawns, taking out some of the different things that's going to encourage conservation measures. So I think it's we all want to do it better, but it's just like for the actual policies. I think it's just a matter of making sure that we have the availability and we don't impede and we don't change things, because we're relying on the stuff we've done since the 80s, and so we're just trying to make sure that we continue to refine those things. And the cost is, everybody says, well, it's going to cost you too much. Well, people didn't used to brew their own coffee. Now they're paying $5 for a cup of coffee, and they don't seem to bother them there. So,
Yeah. I remember coming when I moved to California. McDonald's was 15 cents a burger, 15 cents for fries, and 25 cents for a shake. And you can't even buy anything even that anymore.
When we talk to our city council, I mean to catch up, but when we talk to our city council folks, their water bill seems to be the most. They told me, if we raise their water bill, they're going to come out with pitchforks at the city council meeting. So it is from the local governance standpoint. We would need to make sure people watch what they're doing, and if you go. And when we were talking about Israel and desalinization, we did a trip over to Israel and we opened a trade office, and they have certain things where it's like you have a baseline of water needs to make your family function. You want to have a yard, and so it drastically goes up. Once you have your basic quality of life, it's real cheap, but then it drastically starts going up. If you want to you want to start using more water outside in your yard, you want to take a longer shower. I mean, this escalates. So that's how they do make it affordable. But they really escalate the price when it's if you want to waste water or use more water, they make it compounding really quick. So that's back to your how do you make it affordable,
Yeah, Senator Dunn, maybe I can compound on that question or bounce on that a little bit, tag on that a little bit. Does the state provide any funding incentives like rebates and things like that? Residential, commercial property owners, any rebates for smart irrigation products, that kind of thing?
That was kind of expanding on the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. We provide it to, not directly to consumers, we provide it to an agency, a city or a county that implements a program to do that. We've had some of the cities have used some of that money to take out to reduce their non-functional turf and grass in some of their own waterways, and or they provided allow. I think I just saw a thing that the city of Phoenix was doing it again. The removal of $2 a square foot if you take out turf. You remove it, then you can get reimbursed for that. So we have this money of it was going into those programs for that. We also did some money on the ag outside of WIPA, where we went to the University of Arizona to convert from flood to drip. If you did these programs, you could have up to $1,500 an acre, and then you had to meet a certain set of. You had to be able to, through the committee, they had to authorize the project so you could have 20% reductions in water, and we've saved. Like 50,000 acre feet a year now through that program that is statewide. That is people are converting and improving their farms, and then we have the data from that and the monitoring and the well monitoring to see how that works, so we can be able to use that data and those and learn statewide how to improve and use less water.
Yeah, I think that's an important factor. I wish California would give more when they did this program where it's cash for grass. And they pay X amount of dollars, $2 to $3 a square foot for removal. And they did a study. The Irrigation Institute in Northern California did a analysis on it. And they said if they used the same amount of rebate money they gave to the homeowners and put that towards the farming industry, they would have made 20-fold time savings of water. So I wish California would kind of move more in that direction of giving more out. One question here, the last question I have is, so for the stakeholders, what do you believe is the role of a stakeholder engagement in water management? Because everybody's part of the whole issue.
I'm a very robust stakeholder engagement kind of a senator. It doesn't matter which bill you're talking about. I mean, whether we're talking, I was at lunch with the representative today from some of the cities about the conservation program. We're trying to restrict the city's mandates on requiring a whole lot of landscaping that's not non-native. But then it's like, well, we're not going to have pretty neighbors. I said, but we have to tighten our belt. So we're going to engage with some stakeholders there. We've had on rural groundwater. I've had stakeholder meetings with like 15 different groups this last 2 weeks, and so we have meetings with the ag stakeholders, the mining, the utilities, the cities. So we need to know how these laws affect them, especially water. Water should be bipartisan, and you should be able to work on these big ideas. We should be working across the aisle, and we should be working with those that are impacted, those that have the water rights, those that are going to have the skin in the game, and those that have their livelihoods on the line. We need to make sure that you have them at the table, along with the other environmental groups and those folks who are trying to stretch and do things for the environment. So it's super important to me.
Mm-hmm. Senator, we really appreciate you coming on. It was delightful. I heard a lot about you from Subsina Kerr, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to connect. And we appreciate everything that you do. And I'm glad we have somebody who knows about water in the legislature. So, thank you very much for being a guest. Anytime you want to come back on and talk about anything, any new legislation that you might propose, or whatever, we'll be glad to cover that for you. And we do appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me, and maybe in a couple months as we get closer to the end, we can talk about what we've gotten accomplished and what we're looking at for the future. So I'd love to be a resource too for you guys. Thank you for having me.
Great. You're very welcome. You have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Hi, Chris. I think that was awesome. Guy really knows his stuff, and from a legislative and a farming industry, and I think that's really important. So he really knows what he's talking about, and that's a good thing.
It is terrific, Rob, and I know you're quite involved in being an Arizona resident and quite involved in the local resources that are available. So it was great that you were able to get Senator Tim Dunn to agree to talk to us tonight. I mean, what's great insight from him for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have to leave and turn it over to our big boss, NBC News Radio. This is their news hour, and we have to let go. Otherwise, they'll pull the plug and step on us, and we'll be out of here. Anyway, so the most important thing we want to tell all our listeners is please
Please
help
keep our planet
blue. Because if you like green, you got to have blue. Exiting. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda is sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.